All right, let's look at this extra problem number 8 from the fall ACP review. Again, this is another problem that was not on the benchmark, but we're going to look at it in expectation of possibly being tested on this. It says which equation represents a slant asymptote for the graph of this function. What we could do here is a slant asymptote comes from the situation bottom. If you remember, there were 3 rules. We could have BOBO, which stood for bigger on bottom, y equals 0. Now that meant the exponent bigger on bottom, which is not the case here. There was another rule that said what we called EATS DC, which stood for exponents are the same, divide coefficients, and so your y would equal the division of your the front coefficients, which in this case would be 2 over 1, but again, the exponents aren't the same here. And so what rule do we follow under? This falls under bottom, which means bigger on top, no horizontal asymptote. Now, if you have no horizontal asymptote, instead what you have is a slant asymptote. And how you find it is you'd simply divide. I would do here a long division. I can't use synthetic because I don't know what x equals down here. To use synthetic, you have to know what x equals when you divide, but I can't really find that. So I'm going to put the whole equation, and I will use long division to divide and solve. So I'm going to divide by x squared minus x plus 5 here. Now, remember the question I asked myself is, what do I need to multiply x squared by to get 2x cubed? Well, the answer is I need to multiply by 2x. So when I multiply x squared times 2x, I get 2x cubed. And then I take that 2x, and I'm going to multiply that times negative x. And so 2x times negative x is negative 2x squared. And then finally, 2x times positive 5 is 10x, positive 10x. Now, before I reduce these or simplify here, the fundamental rule of division is we always switch the sign. So this becomes negative, this positive becomes this negative, becomes a positive, and this positive actually is going to become a negative. So these go away, and this becomes negative 3x squared. And then I have a negative 8x and a negative 10x, which gives me negative 18x. Carry down your 1. Now that I've carried down my last terms, I know right now this is going to be my last step. So I start over. What do I need to multiply x squared by to get a negative 3x squared? Answer, negative 3. Now that should be my equation right there. But let's check it real quick here. You would get negative 3x squared, and then you take your negative 3, multiply it by negative x, which will give me positive 3x. And then you take that negative, or that arrow, we'll move it here, so negative 3 times 5, which gives me negative 15. Again, to simplify, fundamental rule of division says we need to switch the symbols. That becomes positive, this positive becomes a negative, and this negative becomes a positive. Those go away. That becomes negative 21x plus 16. That's my remainder here. Your slant asymptote is the top, which I already circled. So it should be y equals 2x minus 3. One more way we could check is you could graph this equation. It was 2x cubed minus 5x squared minus 8x, and then plus 1, and all that was over x squared minus x plus 5. So there's my graph, and I can zoom out a little bit here in a second to see it, and I think the slant asymptote where the graph it approaches was 2x minus 3. So I'll type that in, and now what happens is I go to zoom out, window, zoom out so you can see this a little easier. As you can see this graph, the blue, where it's heading, is the same place the red is going. This red cuts right through the center of it, and I could keep zooming out, and you would find out that this graph continues. They continue to follow each other more and more as we go through. If you tried any of the other answer choices, for example, if you chose F, F would have the same slope of the red line. The slope would stay the same, but all that would happen is this negative 3 would be changed to a negative 7, which means its y-intercept would be lower. So if I change this real quick, you'll see why it's wrong. See how this does not follow on both sides? It's just been shifted down. So the correct answer was 2x minus 3.